Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Tonight we talk about the new Jane Crow. I have a few guests in the studio tonight that are angered by not only men who've been incarcerated, black men who've been incarcerated disproportionately, but also now the growing number of females, black females, who are being incarcerated. So without any further ado, I'm going to tell you who our two guests are tonight, and they are Sadiyah Evangelista, criminal defense lawyer for 15 years. She works hard in the courthouse, and she is the proud mother of 7. And she's a wife, mother, and criminal defense lawyer. She works hard every day, every night. And then I have the infamous Derek Muhammad. He's an activist who we hear from all the time throughout the city and surrounding counties, getting on us, making us aware, creating the conversation, stirring up our emotions about things that are disparate and disproportionate in our communities. So without any further ado, let's get on to this hot topic that Miss Sadiyah Evangelista wants to tell us about. One of the things she showed me right before we started was she wrote out 10 bullet points to talk about in those facts, and I actually want to get through them, Sadiyah. So let's talk about a few of them, please.
Okay, so we're talking about the new Jane Crow and the disproportionate treatment of African American women or minorities, period, in the criminal justice system and the effect on the black female. Now, we talked about the statistics. Now, one of the statistics is while non-whites make up about 30% of the United States population, they account for 60% of those in prison. And when I say non-whites, I mean Hispanics, I mean African Americans. That's who I'm referring to. And so the prison population grew by 700% from 1970 to 2005, a rate that is outpacing crime and population rates. The incarceration rates disproportionately impact men that are not white. So 1 in every 15 African American men and 1 in every 36 Hispanic men are incarcerated in comparison to 1 in every 106 white men. Now, let's talk about the women. From 1970 to 2005, you had an 800% increase of women in the prison industrial complex. That's a lot. Now, you have to ask the question, why such a great number? Why such a great leap? Okay, and we can talk about the history about it, but what you're seeing is that 1/3 of that is African American women and Hispanics, and the population is growing more and more each year.
Wow, wow. Let me just let you speak on that, Derek, to get your voice in right away.
Well, let me first say thank you so much for having me on your show, finally.
Okay.
And
I thought you've been here before.
I've been here before, but I've never been on your show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's an honor and a privilege.
Thank you.
Well, the concept of the new Jane Crow is one that I believe that we really need to begin to take a look at. Everybody's familiar with the names Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Jordan Baker, Freddie Gray. These are the names of young men who literally have become unfortunate celebrities because the oppression that has been heavy-handedly placed upon them by the criminal justice system have made them icons and literally they're like martyrs. But names like Renisha McBride unfortunately go unnoticed. Our sister Sandra Bland, her case was pretty high profile, but for the most part, there's been so much oppression of black women by the criminal justice system, and it's kind of going unnoticed. So we believe that the new Jane Crow is something that we need to talk about. We believe that when you teach a man, you teach an individual. But when you teach a woman, you teach a nation. And so on the same level, when you incarcerate a man, you incarcerate an individual. But when you incarcerate a woman, you incarcerate a nation because a woman is the nation's first teacher.
Wow, that's powerful, Derek. That's really powerful. You know, it's very disheartening for me when we talk about that. It's very disheartening. Sadiyah, let me just let you jump in before I say anything else. Talk to me some more.
Okay, so when you're dealing with the woman in prison, you know, we're dealing with the sexual abuse pipeline. A lot of the women in prison have been affected by sexual abuse, domestic abuse. 60% of the women who are in prison right now, they have children who are dependent upon them. So many of those women are there for these sex crimes, for drug crimes, nonviolent crimes, but yet we're spending all of this money by imprisoning these women, especially black women, but yet they're pouring money into foster care. They're pouring money into the prison industrial complex, but not the rehabilitation, not to give this woman a second avenue in order to get her life together and heal her mentally, because there's a lot of mental health issues as well when we're dealing with these women.
I totally agree with that. What do we say to our negative brothers and sisters that say, well, women are committing more crimes, they're becoming more violent, they're doing more copycat crimes like men? You know, they're doing robberies now. They're doing more robberies with guns and using dope more, and they're prostituting more. What do we say to those people?
Well, the statistics does not back that up. Let me say that first of all. The statistics show that the women who commit the crimes, they're either crimes of property, meaning theft, some type of fraud, or we're dealing with drug abuse. And so when you see violent offenders like that, those are the exceptions and not the rule.
And the exceptions are the people, I believe, that we built prisons for.
Absolutely.
Because those are the people that we just cannot trust in society. So I agree with you. What do you think, Derek?
I think that we have to look at this for what it really is. We live in a country that, in a great way, it was built on slave labor. And the prison industrial system has become the new form of slavery. Mm-hmm. That's why it's called the new Jane Crow. And what we as a people have to remember is they didn't just enslave the black man for 310 years. The black woman was right alongside him picking cotton. So if this is the new form of slavery, then we should expect not only for them to target us for incarceration, but to target the female as well. But we have been placed in a situation as black men where we can't allow this to take place on our watch. I look at the young girl who in McKinney, Texas, who was is up near Dallas.
Ooh.
She was 14 years old.
Ooh, every time I think about that, I get mad.
And did you see that police officer
that
grab
big
her?
fat police officer grab her by her hair and put her face. I talk about this every week. If I wish a man, that little girl couldn't weigh more than 100 pounds.
In a
I
bikini.
wish in a bikini. I wish a 200-pound man would take my daughter. My daughter is sassy as hell. She's 20. I have beat her ass, popped on her butt, but I would never put her head in the ground. That's what dogs pee and defecate. That's where animals are crawling. That's what snakes are. That's what possums are every night. That's where rodents are. And we're gonna put a baby's head in the ground. Oh no, I'd have found his daughter and her head need to go in the ground. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you're gonna put your heavy fat knee with all that equipment on her back? Mm-hmm. Really? While she was sitting there? Okay, nobody get mad at me. I'd have gone to jail because we didn't have to talk about that. I had to knock on his door, man to woman, okay?
Yeah, and y'all would have been getting my bail money together too.
Oh yeah,
Sister
oh
Vivian.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
oh
And
yeah.
I'd represent you.
Put my baby's head in the ground? Mm-hmm. Oh no, you lost your mind.
Which goes back to my point. As men, we have to develop a mentality that we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect our women and our children.
But just think, I mean, that McKinney, Texas thing, let's get back on that. That is an example of how society does not care about our children. You're gonna let a man put a girl, you think that they need to put a white girl's face in the ground like that? I hope my baby's head is never, if a husband put his wife's head in the ground, the police would have taken him to jail. If a daddy put his daughter's, did her like that, that would have been injury to a child. But you're gonna let a police do that unprovoked? Really? And
Yes.
that's okay? But that's the society we have created, and that's the society we have to stop.
And you're talking about a police officer who, to this day, still roams free. He was never punished for doing that. And
He was fired.
he was fired?
Oh yeah, he was fired.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Let me just tell you this: he was fired. I was in Dallas. You know, Tom Joyner's there. You know, I thought he was. You know, that man either they allowed him to resign. He was fired. No, he had to go. Within a month, he was gone. No, he left.
Okay.
So when you look at
did he resign or was he fired?
The news report I first had said fired, and then later I heard he resigned. But generally, when something happens like that, you're allowed to, you know, baby.
But it goes back to the point that I was making. He was still allowed to roam free.
And can get
whether
another
he was
job.
fired or whether he
still has
resigned
a
or whatever.
T-Close license.
Yeah,
Right.
he was allowed to roam free. He wasn't supposed to get away with that.
Oh, no.
And when I say he wasn't supposed to get away with that, I mean he wasn't supposed to get away with that.
Right.
That's the mentality that I have, and that's the mentality that I'm trying to make contagious in our community. There's an attack on us, and we're at war. So we have to have a warlike mentality when addressing these issues, especially when it comes to our women and our children.
Right. And she was a minor, let's not forget that. She was not a grown woman, she was somebody's baby. And so when you look at these...
And all she was saying was, I'm going to call my mama,
Right.
just like babies
Exactly.
do.
Exactly.
You telling little kids to go home, well, most of their parents dropped them off, so I can't leave without calling my mama. And all she's screaming is, I'm going to call my mama, and you treating the baby like that? Because he'd have treated the mama like that. That's the disrespect that white males have for our children and us as black women, and everybody allows that to go on like it's nothing. I didn't hear any of my white friends, I'm in that courthouse every day, say that was a shame the way that man treated it. Because if society would have thought that and protected her like she was their own child, then cops wouldn't do that. I mean, that cop, even when people tried to stop him, the other kids, he was like trying to go after them and pull guns like he had a right to he could have broke that little girl's back like they broke the man's back up in Philly.
Well, that brings us to Sandra Bland and what happened to our sister in Waller County. You know, he goaded this sister. You know, first of all, he racially profiled her. Let's be real about that.
Yes.
He called it a pretextual stop, but he racially profiled her, pulled the sister over, and then she had no warrants. You know, he ran everything, and that wasn't good enough for him. So when he walked up to the vehicle, you know, he saw that she was irritated because she knew that there was no reason for that specific stop. And then as he goaded her, he just created a scenario and a situation that he's supposed to be trained to de-escalate, which it went the other way.
And I watched our lieutenant governor say that, well, we looked at it wasn't racial because we looked at how he dealt with other black women he'd stopped that day. But our lieutenant governor missed the mark. How did he deal with white women who are belligerent and agitated? That's what we need to know. We need to know when he stops a white or Hispanic woman similarly situated for a traffic stop and they're irritated, they're a little sassy with him, does he pull them out of the car and knock them to the ground? That's the video I need to see. I need to see a belligerent white female and what happens, and I bet she's not knocked on the ground. What do you bet?
Oh, he'll let her go. Let's just be real about it. Because he really had no probable cause to continue with the stop.
And even if he did, she has a constitutional right to smoke her cigarette. And if the officer had the right frame of mind, he would have realized something was wrong with her. I smoked for 30 years. If you won't put your cigarette down when you're going through a traffic stop, that shows that you're in a crisis. You're very, very nervous because smokers smoke more when they're nervous, okay? And she was nervous. She was agitated.
Right.
She was anxious, and she was trying to calm herself down by smoking. She was probably, if he saw the butts in that cigarette, her ashtray probably was full of cigarettes. She was probably chain smoking. And, you know, that's the problem. He was the last straw for that woman. She was very, very upset. But the point that I want our brothers and sisters to know is that we pay that officer's salary, we pay the salaries. And I continue to say, we need to I know individually we don't care about politics, but we've got to get behind our political leaders. We've got to ask every mayoral candidate, are you going to hire a police chief when he stops and makes 10 black boys get out the car to search their car? He's going to make 10 white boys get out their car on a traffic stop and search their car. 10 Hispanic guys, 10 Asian guys, because I bet you, same age, they're going to have the same amount of drugs in their car. If you take them out their car and search them. Let's just be real. Let's talk about what they're doing. You find weed and it smells like weed. Now, half of them smell like weed or they smell like cigarettes, but they have a right to smell like weed. That doesn't mean anything. If you smoke weed in your home or smoke weed somewhere else, that's not what you're getting charged for. But we need to start, and I tell them, I mean, we have got to get more politically astute. What I would like you activists to do is we have got to train people to be more astute. We got to stop brothers and sisters from being mad about police chiefs when we don't care who the mayor is, because the mayor appoints the police chief, okay? We need to stop getting mad at President Obama or any president we have because Congress makes the laws. We have got to focus on Congress. We need to start talking that talk. President is fine. They're the last. What I do on here is educate. So they're the last, you know, Congress makes the law, the Senate then has to pass it, and then the president either he signs it into law or he vetoes it. We need to understand that, and we need to preach who our Congress people are. We need to preach who makes the laws in Texas. Just like these 3 strike you're out. It doesn't have to be 3 strikes you're out. That's what some old man did 30 years ago. That doesn't have to be the law. Weed is illegal. Weed don't have to be probable cause. I'm encouraging everybody that's 30 years old to run for the state house here in Austin. Change the laws. You can have something on your record and 10 years later, even if it's a final conviction, it can be expunged. Some states already have those kind of laws. If you have an old theft conviction, not deferred adjudication, not a dismissal, you can go and get it expunged. It's all a matter of the pen. Okay, stop ranting.
No, I mean, what you're saying is absolutely
because
right.
we have to educate. People talk all day long. I get so tired of these stupid talking shows in Houston because nobody talks about the way laws are really written and who actually has the power.
But I think our education needs to be based more in self-determination, because if you don't teach the people self-determination, if you don't teach the people the importance of unity, and if you don't teach the people the importance of ownership and us looking out for us first and foremost,
right,
then we can go to the polls. But if we're voting sporadically and not voting in the block, then we don't have any power at the polls.
I agree.
Our power is found in our unity. Right. It won't be found anywhere else. So we can get 100 people who are under the age of 30 to go and run for the State House. If they don't have the masses of black people behind them, they won't be able to go to the State House, right, and institute black people's agenda. Black folk, we need our own agenda. And I'm not talking about no rainbow coalition. I ain't talking about nothing integrated. I'm talking about something for us, by us. The Mexicans are looking out for the Mexicans, as they should. Yes, Jewish people looking out for Jewish people, as they should. White folk been looking out for white folk since white folk been on earth, as they should. We're the only ones who feel like we have to apologize for looking out for our own. So we got to encourage black people to open up businesses and create, right, jobs. And we have to encourage the community to drive past Starbucks. And if you got to drive 10 miles up the road and pay 10 cents more at a black coffee shop, you go spend your money with your own like everybody else is doing. If we don't do it like that, we'll always continue to be in the same condition that we're in right now.
I agree with you, Derek. Beautifully said. Give us another point, Sadiyah.
So, we were talking about the children, and what you find is that there's a disproportionate number of Black and Hispanic students who represent more than 70% of those involved in school-related arrests or referrals to the law enforcement. Currently, African Americans make up 2/5 and Hispanics make up 1/5 confined youth today. Now, the data showed that 96,000 students were arrested and 242,000 students were referred to law enforcement by school during the years of 2009, 2010. So we have the school to prison pipeline. And you talk about Congress, you talk about the laws, but this has been set up that way. I mean, if we have prison reform, if we change the way that the criminal justice system is, then what's going to happen? Let's be real about it. You're going to have probably 4 out of 5 people, 4 of them are going to be released. You're going to have over 1 million people who are going to be out of work. You're going to have the prison industrial complex, the private industry shut down. So this is built into our social fabric. Let's be real about it. This is a system that has been set up and designed for a specific purpose.
And the prison system in America is designed to warehouse those citizens who are unwanted. It's set up to warehouse the unwanted. So most of the people that you find in prison, there is a targeted, systematic plan to herd them into these warehouses. Why? Because we don't want you here. Now, so for years, the target was the black male. But to be honest with you, they've locked so many of us up that it's very little meat on the bone. So now they're going after the black woman, which is one of the reasons that black men and black women, we have to be more united now than ever before. We don't need to be going into their courts trying to solve problems that we can solve in our own community. You know why? Because a black woman thinks she can walk into a courtroom and use the law to hurt her husband or her child's father or whatever. But what she doesn't understand is that that judge don't give a doggone no more about you than he does about him. And at the end of the day, he'd be happy to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And that's what's happening in America. So they brought us here 460 years ago to use our hands and our strong backs to till the field and to pick the cotton and to dig the ditches and to clear the underbrush and to build up the White House and everything else that we did to build this country. But they don't need us anymore. They've got machines that pick the cotton now. And we're at the point, we're so sophisticated, we ain't trying to pick no cotton anyway. We don't even want to work at McDonald's, which I don't understand. So, my advice to brothers is to go out and create a job for yourself. Because if America doesn't have enough jobs to give their own white folk, then you're not going to get one either. We got to create jobs ourselves, and that comes through unity and cooperative economics. But they have nothing else for us to do here in America. Pharaoh has let us go. He's let us go. And so instead of us roaming around, because we're still making babies, you got to remember that white folk are at what they call zero population growth. That means they're like a hamster on a wheel. Every time a white person is born, one dies. They not growing. But the sisters walking around pregnant all day long. And let's not talk about our Latino brothers and sisters. They're populating big time. So this is population control that we're dealing with. And we have to be wise against Pharaoh's plan to lock us up and to destroy our future. We as a people, we have a bright future. And just as Joseph became a master in the land where he was once a slave, I believe that President Obama's presidency is just a sign of our future. We're going to run this town. We're going to run this thing. My man, Dr. Ben Carson said that he don't believe a Muslim will ever become president of the United States of America. And I did an interview the other day about that. And I told the interviewer, well, you know, that was a time when we didn't believe that a black man could ever become the president of the United States of America. I mean, we thought that was the biggest pipe dream ever born.
Who would have ever thought it?
Yeah.
And twice.
Right. But
Right.
But he was in front of the White House shaking hands with the Pope today, and his middle name is Hussein. So we don't believe in the impossible.
Right.
Yeah. But that is the fear. The fear is that we brought them over here as slaves. And just as Joseph became master in the land where he was once a slave, what's going to happen if black folk take over?
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. Food for thought.
Food for thought.
Tell us another statistics.
So, yes, ma'am. So you have to ask the question, why from 1970 to this present time have we seen the prison population for black men and black women rise exponentially? Well, we talked about politics. Now, there was a concerted campaign. Now, you go back to Jim Crow, and the Jim Crow laws were instituted after slavery. What are you going to do with all these black people who have no jobs, who are roaming around as if they're free, right? So you create this separation, and so this is when the black code laws came in, this is when the Jim Crow, so you created a caste system that divided the blacks against the whites, and they used the poor whites to implement this and to make sure that it was enforced, and they used the policing to make sure that this happened. So this is what we see right now in modern time, right, at this dispensation of time. And so when we had the civil rights movement, you know, and we stood up and we fought and we died and we bled to have equality, and you no longer can have the separate, and you had to have equal, right?
Right.
So-called, right?
Right.
So now you can't say black and whites. You can't say coloreds. You can't say whites anymore.
Right.
So what do you create? You create a new caste system that will be able to control a particular population.
Right.
So then you had what you call the war on crime, right? So the government from top on down was pushing this war on crime. We didn't have drugs in our neighborhood. We didn't have crack cocaine in our neighborhoods. Where did that come from? We didn't have guns in our neighborhood. Where did that come from? We were too poor and too ignorant to be able to bring that into our neighborhoods. Where did that come from? And so all of a sudden you got all of this funding from the federal government to be able to fund this war on crime. You had the media pushing it. You had the newspapers, pushing it, and then the face that you saw was who?
Right.
Was the black man, was the black woman, was the non-whites who were the ones that were committing all these crimes. Having the drugs, you talked about just because you smoke it, that doesn't necessarily mean you possess it. So you criminalize a person for being in possession of this particular contraband, paraphernalia, right? And so what do? Okay, so now they're in jail. We talk about the 13th Amendment. Slavery has been abolished. But what happens when you go to jail? What happens? Your rights are taken away from you, right? It's the new F word, felony, right? Your rights are taken away from you. You have a limited ability or no ability to vote at all, right? You can't get housing, right? Employment is hard to find when you have a conviction on your record. So we're back to legalized discrimination all over again. But now we have a race-neutral word.
Felony.
Felony.
Criminal.
Yes, ma'am. So it's been set up that way. So that's why we call it the new Jim Crow, and that's why we call it the new Jane Crow, because now the women are being more impacted by it than before.
Wow. What do you say, Brother Muhammad?
I say that I agree with Sister Evangelista 110%, and that the war on drugs, which was a farce, and also a money-making scheme, and just as we were when we were first brought here on slave ships, we were made merchandise of during the war on drugs. Look at all your major kingpins, Freeway Ricky Ross, Frank Lucas, all of your major kingpins who made millions of dollars during the drug trade. They all ended up in prison, and at the end of the day, they ended up with absolutely nothing. But the real kingpins who made the money before it hit the hood, they're still sending their children off to private schools, and our children are going to their children still trying to get a job. So after the war on drugs came this big thing with privatized prisons. And it's gotten so bad now, Sister Vivian, that there's so many black men locked away that for every 100 black women in what they call the free world, there are only 83 black men.
Wow.
So if you line up 100 black women, who want to have a family, they want to have a productive and healthy relationship, they want to have children, just like that which is natural. It's natural to want that. 17 of them are already disqualified. And then you wonder why many sisters are choosing to go into an alternative lesbian lifestyle. There's not even enough men out here. So now you have so many women and you have a shortage of men. Well, the women, even though they're the most valuable creatures that God has ever created, they lose their value. Anytime you have an overabundance of a product, what happens? It loses its value. It loses its stock. So you have a mistreatment of women. Now, I believe that since they told the story of Adam and Eve got blamed for Adam, eating the apple, and they've been blaming women for everything ever since then.
Yeah.
And so we see a basic devaluing of the female in society. So now that women are being herded into prison, just like black men, there's no outcry. Why is there no outcry? You have to look at the propaganda that preceded it. You have to look at the negative images that have been put out through social media, on television, through music. When you look at the celebrities that they choose to make the stars. See, when civilized society looks at some of them, they turn up their nose. So when they see Sandra Bland being arrested on the side of the road, they don't know Sandra Bland from Adam. But what they're going to do is they're going to take what they see and compare it to the fight that they just saw on Facebook. Because, you got these sisters having these fights. They're in the middle of the street, cussing one another out, fighting one another, tearing one another's clothes off.
Wow.
And this is the order of the day. So this is the kind of propaganda that's like a record playing over and over and over and over again in society. And it further brings down the value of black woman, who is, might I say, the mother of civilization. But the mother of civilization is being promoted to the world to look like a trap queen.
Right.
So when they see her handcuffed and thrown to the ground by a grown man who puts his knee in her back and handcuffs her as if though she's a real threat, there is no outcry. Why? Because she's nothing but a trap queen anyway. So what we have to do as men is we have to be found lifting up the black woman. We have to be found elevating our mothers and our grandmothers and our daughters and our wives and letting the world know that these are not our women. These are God's women. And if you put your hands on them,
That's right.
It's
there
consequences.
is a price to pay.
There are
Right.
consequences. There are real consequences. Thank you, Derek. That's a
Excuse
beautiful.
my rant.
No, I love ranting. I love ranting. That's what this is. This is a First Amendment show where we educate, we rant, we talk, we get it out. This is our voice.
That's right. That's right.
And I love it.
Tell us our next point.
So, you know, one of my teachers, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, said that a nation can rise no higher than its woman. And so when you look at a civilization, you focus on that woman. And so what we see, again, is the attack on the black woman. As Brother Derek talked about, you see a trap queen. Why are they degrading us? Because they're taking away the value of our lives so that when something does happen to us, when we're putting in jail, you know, then how we perceive each other, you know, is not reflective of the real reality. So what happens? Now they're attacking the black woman. That means they're attacking our children. So we're talking about the prison pipeline. So they need somebody else to bring into the prison to continue the prison industrial complex. How are they attacking us? They're attacking our children, our youth, through the music and through the images that they portray. Suggestion is powerful, extremely powerful. You know, we can hear a song and, you know, I always make fun. We got these jungle beats and we're dancing, but we're really not paying attention to the words that are coming out of this music. You know, I read that back in the 90s, before the gangster rap was promoted, that there was a meeting with music executives. Top music executives came together, and it was a private meeting. And in that private meeting,
did they include the rappers or just the
no?
executives?
It was the
Just
executive.
executives.
It was the people who pay the money, who make the decisions.
But in the 80s, as you know, and you're alluding to, in the 80s, the kids couldn't go to those executives. They had to make the music themselves. That's why they all became multimillionaires.
Right.
But in the 90s is when they decided, shit, these kids have made this money for themselves. It's time for us to get some of that money. So that's when the meeting happened. So tell us about the meeting.
So one, they wanted to take the economic power away from the children. And then two, they want to supplant a message to be able to infiltrate and have them herd into the prison industrial complex. And so in this particular meeting, they were talking about the privatization of the prisons.
Wow.
And how do we fill up the prisons?
Wow.
Well, we fill the prisons up by giving a subliminal message to these children on gangbanging, on drugs, on the degradation of the woman. And so what do you see now? Our children, our youth are trying to mock and try to mimic. You know, you see our young men with their pants hanging off their butt. They're doing it, but they don't even really understand what that actually meant.
Right.
Being
Come get some of those booty. Come
While
get
you
some
were
booty.
in prison, that was nothing but an invitation and a
Come
sign
get some of this booty.
that I was available for.
And every time I see a man with his pants, that's what it looked like. They asking me to go into a private space. That's what it looks like to me. When I see a young man with his, when I see his underwear, I tell him I see their panties because I want him to let them know it's a girl thing, and you're inviting me in like a hoe. That's what it looked like to me.
Yes.
When a man does, I don't punch no punches. You know I don't punch no. I don't hold it, baby. I tell it like it is. You look like you inviting somebody to go inside your pants. We have a call. So caller, if you're still holding on through our ranting, please turn your volume down and state your case.
Hello, my name is Tony. I'm on the side. I know y'all give the media power over our youth. I don't believe they're controlled like the way y'all stating.
So what do you think? What do you think the media has done?
I mean, I don't believe it had that much because the information age, everybody knows a lot of stuff off the internet. And I don't believe that the youth, they don't react quick as and the other. I think they're more informative than any generation that we ever had. They know a lot.
So why, if they're so informative, I guess what we don't understand is if they're so informative, why are more of them in prison? Because in my generation, hardly anybody went to prison. And we had some bad kids. The only people who went to prison were the ones that were violent. So why are they going to prison more if they're so informative?
Because people don't have great lawyers and...
Well, I'm a great lawyer.
Go to prison, they go.
Yeah, I mean, I think they fall for the okie doke. What we're trying to say is they might have a lot of information, but a lot of that information is subliminal and it's bad information, and they falling for the okie doke. They falling for the okie doke, and that's what we're trying to say. It's not. There's all kind of information out there. There's good information. There's educational information. Then there's okie doke. There's BS. There is take you down the wrong path information, and what we're trying to say is that I guess what they gravitate to is not the proper information, because if they're so smart, they shouldn't be in prison.
But I wouldn't blame that on them, the prison. I blame that on the system.
But remember, most of them don't have parents, because now we're dealing with 3 generations of prison. We have kids. When I grew up, the only people that didn't have parents were those whose mama died or daddy died. A few of them left, but that was very unusual. But now it's generation after generation with no mother, no father, because they've been to prison. That's so common for the daddy, granddaddy, and so the kids just feel like that's going to be a part of life. It's a new way of thinking.
Yeah, it's sad, but I don't think they're controlled to go to prison, though. I don't think nobody making nobody subliminally do nothing. I don't think for that.
I understand. I understand your point, and you have a point.
You have to understand the power of the subconscious mind.
That's right.
In order to appreciate what Sister Sadiyah is saying. Minister Farrakhan has a saying that I love. It says that he who controls the diameter of your thinking controls the circumference of your activity. And the brother was saying he doesn't think the media is controlling our children. Well, maybe he's thinking about CNN, MSNBC,
Well, give
Al
us an
Jazeera.
example. Both of y'all think of examples of the way the media.
No, but what I was saying is the youth are probably not sitting down watching CNN. But
Right.
what he has to understand is that the music industry is another form of media.
Right.
And if you think that rap music has no control over young people, then you're living under a rock.
Let me give you an example of what they're saying. I'm a lawyer. I hang with a lot of other criminal lawyers. Sadiyah Evangelista is a great criminal lawyer that I've known, and she's, since she became a lawyer. I'm a little older, so I've been there a little longer, but she's been there 15 years.
Ain't that much older.
Oh,
no.
I graduated from college 35 years ago. So
Black don't crack.
I qualify. So let me just tell you this. But the point is, one of the lawyers was talking about, in her 30s, was talking to me today, telling me a story about how she went to another female lawyer's bachelor party somewhere downtown. And she said, these kids are living like these rap songs. She said, young kids, it looked like they didn't have much money, 21, not to say much money, but you couldn't tell that they had a career. Pants sagging down, don't look like real rappers, she said they were doing bottle service. Like, she saw a table of kids, there was about 5 or 10 of them, buy at least 20 bottles of a champagne that costs $155 a bottle. Now, the girls who were there were lawyers. They said they bought 2 bottles to celebrate. It's a bridesmaid type of party, $155 bottle. That bottle service, honey, we don't even do that. That's straight from rap. That's straight from song. That's straight from music. The term bottle service is from that. So they are completely influenced by that. She said they had no idea how they paid that bill.
That's a college tuition right there.
That's college tuition, 10 bottles of 100. So that's straight rap. But I appreciate you calling, and we're going to make a few more comments, and you're welcome to call back, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, the reason corporate America is paying millions of dollars to these rap artists to promote their products is because they know how much influence they have over the younger generation. And black children in America are the cultural leaders, not just of the country, but of the entire world. You can go anywhere on earth. You can go to Turkey, you can go to Saudi Arabia, you can go to Africa, you can go to any of the continents, and you will see a reflection of black culture. That's how powerful our children are. But they're being manipulated by other forces in order to lead us in the wrong direction instead of us using our own power to help to make us free. For instance, this movie, what's it called, Straight Outta Compton? And I hadn't seen the movie yet. I hadn't either, but I heard it was a great movie, and kudos to the brother who directed that movie. I heard it was good.
It's great.
But as my sister talked about, in the 80s, you had the war on drugs. Coming out of the war on drugs, you had groups like Public Enemy, with conscious rap music, with strong messages, Grandmaster Flash. And then they had this meeting. Well, after this meeting, you saw the emergence of NWA and other groups that spit gangster rap. It was reality rap, but it had an effect on the mind. When NWA came out, I was probably about 19, 20 years old. Did it have an effect on my mind? Hell yeah. So I'm speaking from experience. Yes, it does affect your mind. So now you have the re-emergence of rappers like Kendrick Lamar, who has an album that's filled with consciousness, and he's the best rapper on the planet right now. And consciousness is coming back. Now, all of a sudden, they come out with this movie Straight Outta Compton. In my opinion, it's as if though they're trying to reattach us to that which is negative. And really, they talk about the beef with Dr. Dre and Ice Cube and Suge Knight and so on and so forth. But behind every last one of those talented brothers was a company that was ran by a Jewish individual who were pulling the strings of each individual, and they were the ones who ended up with all of the power. Tupac is dead, but who owns his masters? Not his family. The companies own his masters. So you have these rappers that are beefing, and our children are paying attention to the beef, thinking that it's some kind of, and now you want to beef with somebody else because you want to be like your favorite rapper. But at the end of the day, most of them, unfortunately, are puppets, and they're having their strings pulled by music executives who end up with the masters
own their
and
intellectual property. Let's say it another way. Those masters own their slaves' intellectual property.
Right.
Miss Qiana Mann joined us in the studio. Thank you, Qiana, for joining us. And weigh in. What's your points tonight?
Thank you for having me. And I wanted to jump in because I did see Straight Out of Compton. I actually lived straight out of Compton. I'm originally from Los Angeles, born and raised in South Central LA. Of course, spent time in Compton, California. And you live in LA, you live in all parts of LA when you're poor because you move around. But I actually did think that it was actually a great representation of the time period. And kudos to everybody involved in making and producing the movies, because you definitely can see that those brothers learned a lot from the industry, and they told our story in the time that it was in terms of the police conduct and everything that was going on at that time. And I want to say this. I work with delinquency in the juvenile justice system, and it's just not our children who are influenced by the entertainers. We are all influenced. That's nothing new. We've always been influenced by our entertainment, about our poets, our writers, our
actresses, actors,
everybody. We've always been influenced. That's a major part of our culture. American culture, black culture. Right. Your entertainers always influence you. And there is a lot of information out there. I agree with the caller. There is a lot of information out there to access where you can find out the truth. Whether these children are being directed to the truth is the question. And so we have the school to prison pipeline that I'm very familiar with the zero tolerance, and that we're not going to be able to help this child in school, in this facility, when we know all of us would have a fight in school and you get your mom called and your mom come down and that's all you needed.
Right.
Okay? But it's not handled like that anymore. Now you get sent to the detention center because you may have even had words that now they are saying are terroristic threats.
No.
So we're not talking, you know how you play the dozens, as they would say. I would talk about your mama and then I blow up your mama, I blow up your, you know how we did.
Yeah.
And the children are doing, these children, we haven't changed. They're no different from us. So I don't want to put it out there like our children are worse than what we've experienced.
Right.
It's nothing new under the sun. It's been the same thing. The system has created this condition.
Right.
Well, we have 15 minutes left, and what you see, Qiana, let's talk about solutions. So the last 15 minutes. So Qiana, what do you think can be done about the system? I mean, I want us to be more a part of the system. That's why I've spent my money and time and run for judge, and that's why I've produced this show every week since 2011, so that we can talk, so I can have a medium to give you videos, so you can put it on your website, so I can put it on YouTube, so we can at least have the work out there, so we can direct kids to conversations. I've even let some of the teenagers produce shows, like we have a junior producer in the studio, and he had teenagers come and talk about their problems a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, beautiful. Great topics. I mean, one young man was a teen parent. Not about teenage pregnancy, a teen parent. Wow. He's 19. He had a kid at 14 and a kid at 19. I learned a lot about that. They put child support on a 14-year-old. And I didn't know that. He got to pay back child. Well, not that he's 19. Okay, I didn't even know how that. I didn't even know that as a lawyer. So I mean, one gay teen talked about how that is to be a gay teen, and another teen talked about police encounters and white privilege in police stops. How the Asian girl was treated versus the Hispanic male versus the black kid, and how they all have been treated in stops. You know, it's really interesting when a 17 or 18-year-old gets stopped and their white friend goes free and they get to brag about it. Or if the Hispanic guy has the Asian little girl in the car that has paraphernalia in her purse, but he gets charged with it because he's the driver, but it's inside her purse. But that's the white privilege. And so I'm trying to explain to people that Black Lives Matter does matter. It's a response to the white privilege in traffic stops. Right. Let's get it straight. So we need to add that to that, because I think our white brethren are thinking when we say black privilege, Black Lives Matter, that their lives don't matter. We recognize that everybody's life matter, but we recognize that our justice system only thinks your life matters. They only think the white privilege matters. But we want to say, I ain't mad at you for having your white privilege. We as black people, we ain't playing the race card like that. All we're asking for is to say your white life matters, but our black life matters too. Okay? And so that's the way. We have a caller. We're going to get you involved in this conversation. Turn your volume down and state your comment.
Hello.
Hello.
About Sandra Bland.
Yes, sir.
Her last recorded words weren't in the video, but in the audio. Everybody should read those words, the transcript. What a brave person to talk to a cop that way. Which she knew she was going to jail. Also, our representative government, they're great at representing Pfizer and Exxon, but not the people. Maybe we should put everything up to referendum. Good show, and I'll hang up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Qiana, let's let you talk a little bit since we're about to shut it down.
Well, I thank you for your work throughout the years, and definitely out there in the forefront in bringing justice to our people. But as far as solutions, I think first we have to start speaking straight words and telling our children the truth, and stop acting as if there is not a white privilege. And then our children who are in this colorblind society at this point, because we've been teaching that in school, get hit in the face with something once they have that infraction or at school, or once they're stopped. So I believe, of course, the activism is great, but we need to be in the midst of it all before it gets to that point. I think the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, we got to get back to that. Because I definitely wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that village. So I can't say that my children are okay because I don't have a child that's been in the delinquency court, or I don't have a son, who's gotten in trouble at school, so it's not my problem. It's all of our problems, because as we see with Trayvon Martin, it doesn't matter. Socioeconomic, it doesn't matter anymore. It has never mattered. But we were under the delusion that it was important. Like if I live on this side of town, that my child is okay.
Right.
So I think we have to come back together as a community, of course, continue to advocate in the system, but I think we have to get laws that reflect what we want and what we believe. It starts at the legislature, and we have to really come together and unify and have a collective effort in saving our children.
That's right.
Unity is definitely a theme that has been preached tonight by Derek and you, and I agree with you. Unity needs to be more on our lips and tongues. Derek, what's some of your solutions?
Well, I agree with Sister Qiana. We have to get back to the old African proverb of each one, teach one, and just get back to the basics of community building. As it relates to the system, I think it's high time that we take a look at Dr. King's words. These are the words that he spoke to Harry Belafonte after civil rights legislation was passed in Washington, D.C. He told Harry Belafonte, he said, "I fear that we are integrating into a burning house." So when we were segregated, and you look at what we built on Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, we in essence were setting up our own systems. When you look at the many black towns that were built, we built those out of necessity. Why? Because white folk didn't want us around them. So in the name of survival, we built our own, and we created our own economic systems. We had our own political systems. We had our own educational systems. We were forced into that. Well, what we thought was survival was really living. And then, of course, integration came into being. We moved into the white neighborhoods, and the white people saw us coming, then they moved to the suburbs, then we followed them to the suburbs, then they saw us coming, then they moved further out, then they saw us coming, then they moved further out.
They moved out of town.
Then they got tired of running, and now they moving back in. Now they moving back in. We gotta set up our own systems. And last point, as it relates to the new Jane Crow, we believe that there's a need for sisterhood right now. The need for sisterhood right now is so great that I don't think we even understand it. Sisters being disunited, fighting over men, the sisters with natural hair versus the sisters with the bundles, all that's gotta stop. You know, the sisters who are conscious, you know, the sisters who are conscious, putting down the sisters who are quote unquote not conscious. Well, if you're so conscious, you know, it's the job of the conscious to make the unconscious conscious of their unconsciousness. That's what Kwame Ture said. So there should be no division among black women.
Right.
All of these damnable videos that we see on social media, sisters beating one another down in the middle of the street, it's ridiculous. And the only person more ridiculous in the video is the man that's holding the doggone camera filming it. So these are the things that we gotta address head on. And so that's the last thing. I think that there's gotta be more sisterhood. And I believe the more you see sisters supporting sisters, just like when Winnie Mandela had to go to jail in South Africa, she left her children with the sisters who were a part of the same struggle. And she did, I think, over a year in jail and many months in solitary confinement. But when she got out, her children were intact. Why? Because a sisterhood was built. But they in South Africa knew during that part of apartheid, during that time of apartheid, that they were at war and that they all had a common enemy. We need black women to understand that today. We are at war and you all have a common enemy. So come together, my sisters, and stop fighting over trifling stuff.
Beautifully said, Derek. Beautifully said, Brother Muhammad.
Yes, ma'am. And so I totally agree with what Attorney Mann said and Brother Derek has said. Sisterhood is so important. Sister Qiana and I, we started an organization dealing out of the new Jane Crow called Queendom Come. And Queendom Come is an empowerment organization for girls and for women, in which we empower them and help them walk in their purpose on purpose. So that's one of the things that we're not just talking it, but we're walking the walk. But the other thing is, if you study the last 2 years of Martin Luther King's life, and the night before he was killed, he talked about economic withdrawal. And so we're on the eve of the 20th anniversary of the Million Man Mark, 10-10-15. All roads lead to Washington, D.C. And Minister Farrakhan has posed a question, justice or else? Well, what is or else? Or else is economic withdrawal as well. We have over $13 trillion dollars in spending power, black people alone. And so once we start using our economic power, because people, they may not understand black, but they understand green. And so once we start unifying our own economic power and withdrawing that from the general population and put it back into our community, then we'll be able to do for ourselves so that we won't have to suffer the consequences. And that's what we're suffering. And I know that we have a very short time, but if you don't mind, Sister Vivian.
We got 3 minutes.
In 1963, Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail chastised white ministers for their indifference to black suffering. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's concierge or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly say, I agree with you in your goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believe he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. And when you say Black lives don't matter, that's a false accusation, because Black lives do matter. And the reason why we say hashtag Black Lives Matter is because you've been silent to the injustices.
Right.
And Brother Derek has a saying about justice. What is that saying, Brother Derek, you always say about justice?
Which one?
Oh, there's so many.
Oh, there's no substitute for justice.
That's right. There is no substitute for justice. We talk about racism, but let's just talk about justice, period.
Right. I hear you. I hear you. One of the things that's troubling me in our local media is the silent majority. I think the DA has talked about. The sheriff has said the guy shot Goforth, or somebody shot Goforth because of Black Lives Matter, just because that was his personal thought. That without investigation, we need to hold our sheriffs accountable.
Absolutely.
We need to make sure that everybody's social media says we don't vote for someone who, we pay you to investigate crimes.
That's
we don't pay you to tell us what your personal opinion is the night somebody is unfortunately murdered.
Exactly
and
what
so
they
we
did.
need to make sure that that's what these kids need to have information about. We pay cops to investigate, not speculate. Okay, and they have gone through that young man, and I'm not saying he did it, I don't know, but the young suspect that they took in, they've gone through all of his social media, and nothing in his laptop or anything knew anything about Black Lives Matter, because he had a mental health problem, has a mental health problem. And like I said, I don't know if he did it, because justice, we live in a society of justice where Black folks try to follow the rules, but we need to make sure that we don't let our public officials jump to conclusion and start saying Black Lives Matter movement, and realize we know your life matters, we're just saying our lives matter too. And don't use it in a way that we don't intend it. Don't use it sarcastically. Don't say, oh, well, all lives matter. Hell, we know all lives matter, but we're telling you, you don't act like our lives matter. And we want you to know that we're gonna try to unify for our own selves behind a phraseology to say, include us. Understand, we're not trying to take your power. We wanna have shared power, and we wanna be treated equally and justfully.
That's right.
And can I hear amen?
Amen.
So anyway, we're getting the noise to wrap up, and I hope that Sadiyah, this is the first time in 4 years you've been here. I hope you come back. Derek, I thought you'd been here, but I guess you haven't been, and you're welcome to come back.
Thank you for having me.
I've had a lot of the Muslim brothers here. I guess Danny comes a lot, and Akili. And then a couple of other guys with similar names, so I get all confused until I see y'all. Oh, that's who that is. Because I think it's you and it's Danny. There was some ex-policeman. I forget the names. I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. And so, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I hope you're not a stranger. I hope you come back.
Thank you.
So if we're getting to wrap up, then I am going to say thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Watch next Wednesday when we have another interesting, thought-provoking topic. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. We've been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate